Let's Get To presents
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Here come the Astros, burning with desire. Here come the Astros, breathing orange fire. Here come the Astros, with winning on their mind. Here come the Astros, number one every time. Go, go, Astros. We want Houston! We want Houston! Alvarez hits a high drive, center field. Beerling's back! This game is turned upside down!
And the pitch is lifted to right by Castellanos. Long run for Tucker over toward the line and foul territory. Makes the catch, and the Houston Astros do it again. 2022 World Series champions.
And now, Go Astros. Astros baseball from three guys who've been there since Art Howe had hair.
Here come the Astros, breathing orange fire. Here come the Astros.
And welcome back to Go Astros. We are here with the usual suspects. We've got Brian, we've got Andy, but we're also being joined by an ambassador from Cardinals Nation. In part, Brian, because you really enjoyed hearing him on Yell Fight Suey, so we thought let's bring him on and talk a little Cardinals baseball. But there's a lot to talk about, guys. Obviously, a weekend of baseball for the Astros that was good. The Cardinals, I don't honestly know, but I did learn today that Hans Zimmer was in the Buggles video for Video Killed the Radio Star. Brian, what is your take on that?
The Buggles are a very important answer to a trivia question.
They are.
Well, there's even more trivia to that trivia question.
There we go. We were joking, Scott, on our little group text for this show of what was the topic going to be. And I said, I think they thought sarcastically was, I'll let you know how the game ends after how the game ends today. Look, Astros did go 4-2 this past week. And again, they did it against pretty decent competition. One of the things I've noticed, and we'll start with Brian on this, is it's a team that at time pitches really well, but doesn't hit, or a team that will swing the bat really, really well and then have a brain fart from the bullpen. It just seems like if this team could actually start to put things together, this would look much different.
Yeah, and part of my both joking but not joking sort of thought when we talked yesterday morning is that if they win on Sunday, which they did, that you end up with, they won 4-3, you end up with a winning week. There are 2 games above 500 for the week, 2 games above 500 for the year. It should feel better. What was kind of notable to me is the Astros had a pretty good week, and the tone among Astros fans is that everything's a disaster. And there were some bad things that happened during the week. The losses were not fun.
Particularly in how they went.
Is particularly struggling. But, if you get beyond that, the bullpen's really good. They got good starting pitching, including from the guys who just came up for the minors. And, there are positive signs. And, hey, Jose Altuve is hitting his rehab assignment. That's also a real positive sign.
And actually got a hit. So had a couple of deep fly balls to center field. And I think Scott and Andy both know that's not an easy park to necessarily hit the ball out of, particularly to straightaway center. So those looked good. Andy, your take.
Kind of along the lines of what you're saying. I'm not worried about our pitching at all. Rafael Montero being, aside for a second, because I know he is the latest DFA candidate from Astros Twitter. I don't know how he wasn't murdered after Saturday's game, frankly, because that's what they were calling for, because we're a big bunch of spoiled babies. And that's going to be my theme today. Astros fans are spoiled out of their ass over the last 6 or 7 years. They don't know what they're looking at. They cry when things don't go right. And they seem to forget that they've won 2 World Series since 2017. Whatever you want to say about them, it actually happened. Instead, we're going to cry because our free agent acquisition hasn't worked out yet. It's very sad. And, he's hitting almost exactly the same as Yuli was last year at this time. And nobody was crying about Yuli. Oh, wait a minute. Astro Twitter was crying about Yuli because they cry about everything.
I want I definitely want Scott to chime in on that because he was giving us the most emphatic nodding up and down. Sorry, Andy, continue.
But to answer your question, my issue right now with what's going on with the Astros is that we can't have more than 2 guys hit in the same week at the same time. This week, it's Jordan and Martin Maldonado of all people. Beyond that, everybody else, and I know Brian's got better numbers than this, OPS, all under 725. The whole rest of the team for an entire week. If your team's being carried by Martin Maldonado, you have offensive problems.
Yeah,
But that's the issue. The other issue that scares me for this week is that we've played 6 series at home. Guess how many series we've won at home this year? One.
That's higher than I thought, Andy.
We can't play at home.
I thought it was 0 too, Brian.
No, we beat the Blue Jays at home. That was a great series. Remember, we all thought that was going to turn the season around.
Well, my other favorite stat is that they've got a winning record versus teams with an 600 winning percentage or higher, and then a losing record versus others. So that's a whole other thing that's on brand.
Series wise, in Minute Maid Park, we are 1-4-1 this year so far, and that is the entire issue with. That's our record right there. That's the issue.
I wanted Scott to weigh in from the outsider's perspective, and I want to pose this for you, Scott, as something else I think it is perfectly fair to question a free agent signing when it does or doesn't work out. I think it's completely disingenuous to pretend like you didn't think it was a great signing at the time. Sometimes stuff happens. No one, if you looked at what Yuli did last year and what was available in the minors to replace him at first base, Abreu was the best signing on the planet, and everybody thought so. It's not worked out. That's it. But what is your sort of take from a distance on what the Astros fans are seeing and how they should be reacting?
Well, it's not worked out yet, right? Yet. That's the key word. You're a month and a half into the season. It's brand new surroundings. It's a brand new ballpark. The person's feeling expectations on themselves to make themselves good enough for the contract they just signed. So you've got to give some. Let me put it this way. When he heats up in July and August and he hits 400 for both of those months, are the same people that are complaining right now going to be the happiest people in all of Texas? Then, yeah, of course they will. Because, I knew it was going to come around. I knew things were going to be great. Look, familiarity breeds contempt, and you guys are very familiar with winning the last few years. And you've had a lot of people jump on your bandwagon that weren't there prior to like 2017, right? So the people that were there for the 100 loss seasons and getting to this point really weren't following, and now they are. We're really strong Astros fans because we're winning. You're in a football state where people are used to playing 1 game a week, and this is playing 6 or 7. Okay, yeah. Going 4 and 3 in a week sometimes is what you need because of the opponents that you're playing. It's a very simple game. It's a marathon. It ain't a sprint, and more teams than ever are in the playoffs, so there's more spots available. I just think that people have gotten spoiled for your team, and with good reason. You've been great the last 6 years. You're still great. You're going to come around. You've got more injuries. I mean, you look like a unit in Korea. I was watching MASH this morning. Sorry, that comes to mind. But you look like a unit in Korea. You got so many depleted numbers right now. And you're still above 500. So it does sound like a whole lot of whining from the outside looking in at a fan base that has been incredibly spoiled and needs to realize that you're above 500 in mid-May. You're going to be fine. I think the bigger problem that you guys are facing right now is that the rest of the division a couple of teams have gotten better. Oakland, clearly not. That's not. But look, Texas is better. LA is playing better than they have. Seattle's kind of not doing what they did last year, but they're still better overall than they were 2 or 3 years ago. The rest of the division is catching up. Houston's not in first place right now in mid-May, and that's why people are in a dead panic. And what they need to do is just calm these babies down and put on an extra size of underwear so it's not so tight around the waist and they can breathe.
I just would like to start referring to myself as the Hot Lips Houlihan of Astros fandom. All right, Andy.
The rest of us do.
Exactly. All right, Andy, let's start picking some things apart. You talked about the offense. There is definitely the concern, and I know that we're not supposed to care about batting average, but Maldonado and Bregman's batting average are getting creepily close to each other. I know that we talk about Memorial Day being the time. obviously there's no need to dust off a panic button until the All-Star break, in my opinion. However, are you starting to see trends that concern you?
It's just we don't have enough major league quality hitters in our lineup right now to make a fair assessment over what we are. It was a big setback, bigger than I think a lot of people want to let on to, that Michael Brantley isn't going to come back. And, realistically, we probably should prepare that for ever.
Yeah.
If he does come back, it's a pleasant surprise. But we played this game with him last year, avoided picking up a left fielder because we thought he was coming back, and we being James Click. And then he didn't. And now it doesn't look like he is shut down for the foreseeable future, I think is the direct quote. Inflammation in a shoulder that you had operated on isn't great. Altuve will likely be back in 14 days. I think that's what everybody's holding on to, but that addresses one spot out of 9 in your lineup. Bregman isn't hitting. Tucker isn't hitting right now. Outside of Yordan Alvarez, nobody's hitting consistently, game to game, week to week. That's the problem. And I don't know how you shake that up mid-season without starting to tear apart some of the things that are valuable on your team, and that's your bullpen. We don't have starting pitching depth to trade from anymore. So there's nobody really in the minors. I know we talked about Drew Gilbert last week, and very wisely you pointed out to everybody who was listening, please don't start talking about him as a major leaguer until spring training next year. That should be real. That shouldn't be something that we're all just sitting here clamoring for. Maybe Justin Durden's a stopgap right now to make up for what they were expecting from Brantley, but the Astros have to get healthy. They have to get Altuve back. And some of the guys that you count on to hit have to start hitting. And that includes Alex Bregman, who seems to be above criticism so far this season. And he's earned some of that, but the reality is he is closer to Maldonado than he is to Alvarez right now.
Yeah, Brian, and one of the things we kept talking about, the difference between the Astros in seasons, not even last year, is the lineup is not as long as it was coming out of 2021, for example. This year, we knew, particularly with the injuries, we would be relying on guys that we really didn't know what we had. I mean, we all thought Hensley would be better, and he hasn't been. That's got to be part of it, right? When you can't get picked up by 6, 7, 8, 9 in the lineup, it makes Bregman, Scott talked about pressure that Abreu is putting on himself. Is Bregman doing the same thing? And we all just need to get them a rub and tug or something?
Yeah. Mrs. Bregman's an attractive woman, so he can take care of that himself. Two, I ran some numbers on Bregman on my Substack this week. He's hitting basically, his underlying numbers look basically like they did last year. And the most encouraging thing from the putting pressure on himself point is that he is walking slightly better this higher rate this year and striking out basically the same. He's, not chasing more pitches. So his swing decisions look the same. He's getting the same quality of contact. The hits are going to come for him. So he's not a guy I'm worried about in the long term. In the short term, I broke out the bourbon on Saturday night. So, for extra time. So, I certainly recommend that to everybody. But yes, indeed, broke out some Morgan Wallens. And
you can.
I don't know. We just broke the universe, man.
I know your education, but you can afford better than Morgan Wallen.
I think we just broke the universe with the whole truck. We got like the cinematic universe going on now. All of a sudden, we're crossing shows and
streams crossed.
I'm happy to participate in that. And early in the season, they got good fortune performances from Mauricio Dubon and Corey Julks. They were getting a lot of balls to fall in. Julks' high strikeout rate has caught up with him. Dubon has gone back to, he is a helpful, but, you really don't want him to be your leadoff hitter. And for long term, that won't be the case. In general, they've had two guys who hit well. Alvarez and Tucker are the two regulars who've been well over average hitters, and everyone else has been below that. And unsurprisingly, their run production has slipped as a result of that. It's been very low. I don't expect that to continue this low, but as long as Jose Abreu is a struggling hitter, it's really hard for the offense to be good because there's not enough above average major league hitters.
Okay, then I'm going to follow up with you, Brian, and then we'll go to Scott and then Andy. But let's talk about Abreu. I had mentioned that some of his underlying numbers that I had seen looked okay, and you almost choked on your coffee laughing at me. What's wrong with those? And were you happy to see Yarnier Diaz finally, hit a rocket yesterday? So it looks like the power is coming.
Yeah, the good news for Jose Abreu, I've got his StatCast page up here. His WOBA on the season, his weighted on base average is 232. Like numbers in the 300s are what you're looking for there. But good news, his expected WOBA is 273. So that's not a dreadful hitter. That's just a bad hitter. So maybe we can expect some improvement there, but not sort of what we're looking for. All of his numbers look worse than last year, including he's striking out more, he's walking less than he has in his career. He's not hitting the ball as hard. And all of that has been really worrisome, and not numbers we saw last season, where again he had a WOBA of 361, for example. He's got a career WOBA of 354, weighted on base percentage. So he should be a lot better than this. We expected a lot better than this. Maybe he's not, and maybe just time has caught up to him. That happens. It's been frustrating, and unlike some other guys, looking at the underlying numbers indicates bigger problems.
And again, it shines a big light, Scott. We talked about this, just sort of the three of us, me, you, and Andy, about the risk of re-signing Brantley, knowing he wouldn't be back until May. And then you see a guy like that who hits for high average and is always steady. I agree with Andy. I think the fact that he hit in AAA when he was down there for his rehab, hit pretty well, as I recall, not really for power, but had pretty good average. And now all of a sudden shut down before he even picked up a bat for the season. It does seem concerning.
Yeah. Inflamed shoulder. And that's the shoulder he had surgery on. Right. So
yeah.
But it's more than, people also need to realize that it's more than just the player, right? It's just the player. Okay. Abreu is struggling, right? He doesn't have as much protection around him. As Andy alluded to, you've got guys that would not be major league starters that are having to play right now because Brantley's out, because Altuve's out. You've got injuries that you're having to plug in. When these guys do come back, you're not going to get Brantley. You're going to get Altuve. You're going to get somebody at the trade deadline, if not beforehand, to help out. When those guys start coming in, then they start adding that protection, and Abreu starts seeing better pitches and numbers start going. The guys who aren't hitting right now are seeing pitches that are more in the strike zone, and they're more hittable, and that's going to carry over. I just, and the other thing I wanted to touch base on that I forgot to mention a minute ago, Jim, I think also part of your fan base is probably looking at the Abreu signing like, you did this before we had a GM. Yeah, you did this, Mr. Meddling owner. And when an owner meddles and you win, you love the owner. But when an owner meddles and it doesn't work out, then he's just a meddling owner who should have had his hands out. So there's a lot of off-season things that
that's interesting too, because it's the move everyone predicted the Astros should make, and all the publications and everything else. And
people start looking in that rearview mirror and they forget how they really saw it at the time.
And two other teams, the Guardians and the Padres, also made large offers, definitely 3 years in the Padres case, to Abreu as well.
Yeah.
Andy?
The media tied Anthony Rizzo to the Astros before the Abreu pursuit. And the Yankees overpaid for Rizzo and got what they wanted. And, frankly, left-handed hitter, younger profile than Abreu, is having, I think, a decent season with the Yankees. Although if you ask Yankees fans, nothing is going well in New York this year at all. They have virtually the same record that we do, but
he just hit 2 home runs on his bobblehead night, though. So Rizzo's like, he's great now, right?
And you get all the Grease references if you sign Anthony Rizzo. It's fantastic. Not PG. I wanted Jose Abreu from spring training because that guy was great. 292, 327, 583. Not setting the world on fire, but hit 2 home runs, 4 doubles in 6 doubles, 2 home runs, and 48 at bats. Seemed like a competent player. And
that's because he was in Florida, and that's where the fountain of youth is.
Well, he's also facing Double-A pitching for a good number of those at bats.
Right.
And for people that like to freak out about spring training performance, like we all saw this spring training means nothing because we saw the same guy can't hit major league pitching right now. I tend to believe that Dusty lets things out in interviews that he probably shouldn't. And I do probably believe that Jose Abreu has some sort of nagging injury that's exacerbating his issues. But I also think the Astros are to the point that they don't really have anybody ready to replace him. So is the difference giving Jose Abreu a couple weeks off on an IL stint and bringing up JJ Matijevic, who is probably going to do as bad? They're kind of landlocked as far as player choices go to fill that spot. And everybody listening to that sentence I just said right now is going to say, well, just play Yonner at first and let him go. I think he's played a handful of innings in the minor leagues at first base. And contrary to Moneyball, first base is not an easy position to just pick up.
It's very hard.
Difficult.
Well, and I part of me still goes back to what Scott said about the pressure thing, because as I recall at the beginning of the season, Abreu was getting hits. He just wasn't hitting for power. And I don't know how much of that changed. I also do believe that there could be some nagging bumps and bruises. This just feels like a season that we're not going to really be able to assess. And we said at the beginning, as long as they're around 500, when Altuve and people start getting back, hello, they are. And, you know, you talked about the difference between the Yankees and the Astros. The difference is that the Yankees, I think, are 9 games back and the Astros are only 3 or 4. So that is, I mean, the Astros are a 4-game sweep of the Rangers away from being tied. And I also looked at the strength of schedule again, and the Yankees and the Rangers now have the 8th toughest schedule remaining. I'm not worried about the Rangers. I'm still worried about the Mariners, as I think we all agree. Now, we did have Scott on to talk a little bit about the Cardinals, and I want to jump into that. And I'll preface you, Scott, by going first on this it's very easy to talk about the on-field performance this year, but Andy and I have told you, and then Andy and Brian and I have said on the show all the time, when the Astros started getting into this, our goal was to become the Cardinals, where, you know what, you might not be winning the World Series every year, but you're always in the hunt. You're always over 500. You're always in the conversation. Somehow overnight, it looks like that organization went from that organization to one that is rudderless and a disaster. So, Scott, tell us a little bit about what's going on in St. Louis that, as you pointed out to me, the fans are booing them.
Yeah. So that does not happen often, but on back-to-back losses to Anaheim, especially when Giovanni Gallegos gave up 2 ninth inning bombs to lose a 1-run lead. They got booed. And then subsequently immediately after that, our manager, Oliver Marmol, when asked if fans have a right to be frustrated, that he said they were basically insane, that there's no way that fans can be more upset than the players are. So thanks there, Mr. Manager, for making everybody feel great. He's on the hot seat, and it's really his second year of being manager. And the reason why is because he brings all of the he brings all of the attitude of Tony La Russa and all of the experience of Bo Porter. I did a little. Yeah. Hey, I knew my audience. How's that? Okay. I knew I'd get a giggle.
Yes, you knew your audience and you just made them all click off. So, we're going to look at our numbers on the episode.
Everybody
the Porter mentioned, just boom.
Everybody started twitching and scratching a little bit, but that's really what, I mean, you had a guy that Tyler O'Neill is a talented outfielder who hits for power and runs really fast when he's healthy. And the problem is that he doesn't stay healthy a lot because his dad was like a Mr. Olympia and he's all jacked up too, and not on Mountain Dew. But Marmol questioned his ability to hustle in the field. So you stir it up with a player, then you talk bad about fans. Is this guy the second coming of Billy Martin? I mean, really, that's what I'm wondering, but with no success. Again, I don't know. Didn't you have a manager named Burns also or something? He was terrible too. So you see, I'm trying to
trying to weave us back in.
But I think the problem right now for the Cardinals, you started slow. You made no moves in the offseason to really bolster your pitching, which, Jordan Montgomery's 4.11 ERA is leading the staff. Eek. That's terrible. We just swept the Red Sox over the weekend. So,
and a good Red Sox team, by the way, not a,
Yeah, but it was also done, in ninth inning heroics, which I'll take it. Don't get me wrong, but still, it doesn't fix everything, right? The pitching problems are still there. You got Flaherty and Wainwright going against the Brewers this week, and they're probably going to get shelled, like they have been the entire year. When Wainwright has a 7.2 and Flaherty has a 6.83 ERA, and that's the problem when you don't sign, when you promise your fans in the offseason that you're going to sign more pitching, you're going to make a big splash, and you really don't. That's not cool. The other thing, the big free agent splash signing was Wilson Contreras, right? He's going to replace Yadier Molina behind the plate. Well, first of all, nobody calls a game like Yadier Molina, and that is missing right now terribly. So where the pitching staff in the past has had an on-field coach that could get them through it, they don't have it anymore. And then to make matters worse, essentially the pitchers go to management and say, hey, we don't like the way this Contreras guy calls a game. We'd rather bring in, Andrew Kisner hitting 170 and have him behind the plate. So now they're turning Contreras into the DH, maybe teaching him how to play the outfield. Oh, but wait, now we're maybe not. Now we're going to move him back behind the plate. But no, now, and this is why people are looking inside the organization. They're dumpster fire. You didn't do what you said you were going to do in the offseason. You let the best catcher in the history of the organization, possibly one of the best in baseball ever, when he retired, you filled him with a guy who you then moved positions and went back to the same stale backup that you had in the past in May. Yeah. And you go to the same stale backup that you didn't want to have starting to begin with, which is why you brought in the free agent. And, oh, by the way, your manager's an asshole who's full of himself. So, other than that, things are great in St. Louis.
Brian, do you have any questions for Scott regarding Cardinal Nation and what you're seeing?
Yeah, one sort of reaction I have to the Cardinals is particularly with the Contreras move and the panic move that was, and maybe wasn't, since he's going to catch today for Jack Flaherty. So I have Flaherty on my fantasy team, so good luck to both of us.
Well, and I just think also too, because Flaherty was going to be a guy that I know Scott and I both thought would be competing for Cy Youngs and just kind of fell off.
Injuries.
He's got injured and he hasn't come back, and then that happens, and knock on wood for Luis Garcia's future.
And Flaherty would rather be in Southern California than in St. Louis from all indications.
He could be somewhere else pretty soon the way he's pitching. So
Memphis.
I don't know that maybe the Angels will pick him up for his sake. The best criticism I've seen of the Cardinals is they've got this outfield surplus. They didn't do anything this offseason to trade one of the outfielders for a pitcher. Everyone could see that as a need except John Mozeliak. Do you agree with that criticism? Are there, are there pitchers out there you thought they could have gotten?
Absolutely. Were you going to get the top of the line? No, because we're not going to pay Scherzer money, right? We're not going to do that. But were there guys available out there? Absolutely. You do have an outfield glut of talent, Brian. That's it's obviously there. You think in the past 2 or 3 years we've let Randy Arozarena go, we've let Harrison Bader go, we let Dexter Fowler go, and we're okay with that. But those other two young guys,
we were also good with letting Dexter Fowler go many years ago.
But your criticism is spot on, Brian. That's a big problem with the organization.
Andy, what about you? What questions do you have for Scott about Cardinal Nation?
Well, offensively, I'm just looking at your top 4 hitters. We would be very happy if we had 4 hitters that were performing, as well as DeYoung, Goldschmidt, and a couple of the others. It looks like Arredondo is having a not great season so far, and I'm not familiar with whether or not he's a slow starter and heating up, or the big problem appears to me to be your starting pitching, because I'm looking at just these whips from the 6 guys you've had start games. All of them, the lowest one is 1.30. Is
that Montgomery?
All of them are 1.57 and higher. So you're practically letting 2 base runners an inning on from every one of your starters. They're giving up a ton of hits. It didn't look like a lot of walks, just a ton of hits, which screams to me, if it's, one guy, that'd be one thing. If it's just Jack Flaherty having a bad season, but it feels like approach is something that's isn't being discussed a lot with your pitchers. I don't know if your pitching coach is any good. I don't know if that is coming from your manager and everybody's just fed up. But if they're just down the line, if I'm looking at this, you guys there's so many base runners that it wouldn't matter who's out there. It's bad.
Yeah. Would you guys say that the Texas Rangers starting pitching has improved this year? Their pitching staff's looking better than it has in the past? I would. Yeah. That's because they have former Cardinals pitching coach Mike Maddox running the show there. This is the first year without Maddox.
That's right. I read about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Half a dozen years. And one thing, as you're watching Astros Rangers games this year and Maddox comes in to talk to pitchers, he extends his hand like this, and I do it toward the camera, and then he'll put it on their shoulder, and it's like the calming claw of Maddox, and you watch the pitcher just become zen-like. No, but Mike Maddox leaving has absolutely impacted this pitching staff. We also have a new hitting coach, which should be a good thing. Paul DeYoung had all-star numbers in 18, I think it was, and then basically hit 130 up until now, and started the year in Memphis, and now he's come back and he's hitting over 300. It's probably an apparition. It's going to go away in a couple of months because that's usually what happens with him. Arenado started off slow. Now he's tearing the cover off the ball. Goldschmidt's being Paul Goldschmidt. He usually does start slow and comes on later, but that's not working. And Lars Nootbaar is a lot of fun. And there was so much talk about him getting traded. And then people watched him with Japan because he has dual citizenship, and watching, the Japanese guy named Lars. They watched him in the World Baseball Classic, and he did great.
I had a Lars Nootbaar with my breakfast this morning. It was fantastic. A lot of protein. Well,
it's a really good.
Fun fact about Lars Nootbaar: has a brother named Nigel.
Wow,
good bar. They're mom and dad are really fishing from.
And he's in British. I think he's like a mobster in London. Nigel Nootbaar. Yeah.
I thought they were a Duran Duran cover band. Lars and Nigel.
That's the cover of the cover band.
They're a Wham cover band. But I knew you were close. Lars Tetsui. His middle name's, isn't that great? Lars Tetsui Nootbaar. But he's a very fun player. There's an overabundance of outfield talent, although Dylan Carlson is now injured. Look, guys, the Cardinals may come back and win this division. I think another thing that has people panicked is the new schedule. So where we would have known that, like, back half of the year, hey, we get to feast on the Reds and the Pirates and the Cubs, we're going to be okay. We can't say that anymore. We do only have to really beat the Brewers in the division. The Pirates are not going to finish the year over 500 with the way they've started out. Nobody else in the division is that great other than the Brewers, but you got to catch them because you're not going to get a wild card spot because there's too much talent in the East and West. So a lot of changes this year. The coaching changes, the arrogance of the manager, the schedule adjustments, and then pitching that pitches to contact, and the shift isn't in place anymore. So there's more holes in the infield. I mean, it's little things that when you add it up, it's like, it all makes sense. This is why it's gone bad. So anyway.
That's another great point. And I would like to point out, if you're interested, I do have a bag of balls and a bunch of leftover AL championship rings from giveaway nights. If you'd like to trade us Paul Goldschmidt for that, we can make that happen, I think.
Bring him home.
I didn't settle for Lars Nootbaar.
I'm willing to give you, let's see, I'll give you Juan Yepes and half of the baseballs. How's that sound?
I like it.
No, actually, that'd be a good trade actually for you guys right now.
We could use Juan Yepes.
Well, and I just, like I said, I obviously we're all really close, and I look forward to, I just hope that the Cardinals can get it turned around organizationally. It does seem like in the minors they have a good system, so maybe you'll start to see that play out.
I think the biggest thing, I was just going to say, Jim, I'm sorry. I think the biggest thing is complacency, and the game has changed over the last 2 or 3 years, and you've got to keep up with that. You can't just be, satisfied to win 91 games, the NL Central, and go out on the first, series of the playoffs. And that's really where the Cardinals are at, and they're complacent to finish there right now. And that's not a winning formula long-term.
Yeah, and I think that's always the case, right? Where and I'll let Brian and Andy weigh in on this, but it's always the danger. The danger is, do you keep doing things the same way, get complacent, or do you get worried about complacency and start making changes you don't need to make to avoid being it's keeping it going is sometimes much harder than building it up. Brian, any last thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is true for both franchises. To go back to the point from the beginning, we're both versions of, since you all do a college football show, we're all versions of Bama, which is that we keep winning, and the expectation is, well, we're supposed to win because we're supposed to win.
Right.
And you win not because you're supposed to win. You win because you do all these things, and you constantly do these things, including with all three of the sort of franchises we're talking about here, changing and adapting over time. The Cardinals are not the same today. The Cardinals have not had a start this bad since the Nixon administration. They've essentially been a top third team in Major League Baseball for at least 2 decades now. They're not the same as they were back in 2002 when they sort of run started. The Astros aren't the same as they were in 2015. You have to change. You have to adapt. You have to find a balance, though, with bringing that to the thing. And the other thing is, baseball's a weird sport, and sometimes bad stuff just happens.
Yeah,
There's
I mean, we always talk
reasons to
about
think, there's lots of reasons if you dig into the numbers where this is just a bad, there's a lot of bad luck to the start from the Cardinals.
And unlike any other sport, Andy, we always talk about in baseball, you're playing the other team, you're playing yourself, and then you're playing the game itself. And there's this very weird thing that can happen. I mean, honestly, Montero in the 2 saves he blew, or the 2 games he really wasn't blown up. I mean, it was a lot of just stupid stuff happening.
Sure. And that's, if you look at the Astros and you look at what, the game has changed a little bit from a standpoint of the bases being bigger, the pitch clock, having people adjust. The biggest thing for the Astros and our pitching, at least early on, was losing the shift and having a defense that's completely geared around the shift. We've also lost 23% of our active roster to injuries. That's a big deal, especially in mid-May. We might get, McCormick's back, and if you want to count him in that number, it adjusted a little bit, but we will get Altuve back. We might never get Michael Brantley back. Luis Garcia is gone for the year. Jose Urquidy, maybe he comes back around the All-Star break, depending on what indefinitely means. And, Lance McCullers Jr. seems to be throwing off a ski slope at this week.
Depending on which pitch he's throwing, though, right, Brian?
Yeah.
And some pitches he's throwing from and some he's throwing from the flat ground, and I didn't realize they did that. And again, Lance McCullers' injury updates are really just a chance. It's like PBS programming. It's a chance for learning.
Scott, if you're not getting the reference, we are now getting distance from the plate, what angle of the mound, where on the mound, not the rubber. He's not thrown from the rubber yet at all. But we get
it's pitch by pitch, Scott,
about where he's throwing from and how many pitches now.
Like the curveball still flat ground, but I think the 4-seamers from halfway up the mound. We don't even.
There's part of me that doesn't want to make fun of this because, Lance is the only player on the team who actually likes talking to the media.
Yeah, no, true.
This is part of what we get from that is that we
have
get too much
information. An organization, that is another change the Astros are undergoing right now. We have gone from an organization who could not disclose a single injury to now an organization that is oversharing on every injury.
I'm not sure which I like better because Dana Brown is straight up. Yeah, I'm really worried. I'm like, well, I'd like you to at least make me feel better for a second.
Oh, it's screwed. We're screwed.
We're screwed.
Go back to the Bill Belichick and the NHL style. He has an upper body injury.
Yeah.
What's the details? That's all you get. He has an upper body injury.
One of these days, Dana Brown's press conference is going to be, oh, geez. That's just going to be it. He's going to walk off. All right. That is Go Astros for this week. Scott, first of all, thanks so much for jumping on. Good luck to your Cardinals. Good luck to the Arkansas Razorbacks as we get into baseball postseason. Everybody else, Go Astros. Brian, your last word.
So, congratulations to my honor students who I have an induction ceremony for today. Go Astros.
I'm going to take the advantage. We didn't do a player of the week this week, but Martin Maldonado would have been mine because he has 1,000 OPS. And I almost promise you I'm not going to be able to say that any other week this year. So go Martin. Go Dana Brown as Private Hudson, our own private Hudson from Aliens, if you get the reference. And go Astros.